left behind 11 years ago the humidity, mosquitoes, lakes, streams, and miles of forest in the Adirondacks, New York, to the man-made aqueducts, sunny sky, dry, and high elevations of Colorado. At first I noticed that the horizon was bigger, an account that the trees were far and few between. The moon is much larger here, and I assume the sun is closer to us as well. Breathing was difficult, and I felt like I was in a constant state of dehydration. You need to drink a couple quarts a day here. Funny thing is, I do not remember drinking water back in New York. Everything seems to have a sharp point here. The rocks, grasses, vegetation. The grass is the color of the wheat, and the stone was not gray, but red, yellow, blue, and even brown. The mountains are not smooth boulders, but rough and unstable slabs of stone, slipping under your feet as you walk. The soil seemed to be dust and hardened clay. I took many photos over the years and learned to appreciate Colorado even more. It gets hot here, and the sky is blue most of the year. However, it is a blue that pales in comparison to that of a sky near great bodies of water. The winters seem long, but the snow only remains for a moment. The sun never is really far away in Colorado. Hey there, Canadian Conquistador. Hola, ¿cómo está? Bien, tú? I'm here in my car. It's got way better sound properties, so I decided to just sit in my parking lot and film this introduction. This video is on food forests. And why you should start a food forest today. Get rid of your grass lawns, watch this video, subscribe, and I hope you enjoy this video. What is a forest garden? Forest gardens are systems that attempt to mimic the forest ecosystem. However, instead of replicating the inedible, we try incorporating fruit and nut trees, shrubs, herbs, vines, and perennial vegetables which have yields directly useful to us humans. It is utilizing your entire property, or a great portion of it, to provide a yield. What things we are attempting to replicate in the food forest is the layers of growth we see in nature. We can see the natural ground cover in the forest as leaves and twigs, and replicate that by using mulch. We can observe the vining plants, the plants that stay low to the ground, those somewhere in the middle, and the overstory dominating trees, providing shade for seedlings. We also want to replicate those beneficial insects and microbial life into the system as well. We can also observe that nature has no caretaker, no weeding is done, watering, tilling, and fertilizing it. The forest is self-sufficient. So to make this short, a food forest or forest garden is a system in place replicating the forest with the sole purpose to provide a sustainable yield with very little input from the manager. Developing a system that leads to sustainability is being a responsible steward of your land. Some may argue of what being responsible actually means when it comes to owning property. My definition of being responsible would be in line with not poisoning my neighbors indirectly with the chemicals I use on my property, or leaching oil into the water table when working on my car in the driveway, or being wasteful with what I've been given in this life. It is the human that is responsible for being a caretaker of sorts of the creation. If we are given domain over something, we shouldn't abuse our power. If we are given something, shouldn't we try and get the most from that something? What if I told you that you could obtain a yield instead of making a green desert? What if I told you that by keeping a lawn has many repercussions down the line? You're abusing water. It takes 3 gallons of water to properly water 1 square foot of grass. Not to mention the chemicals needed to have that perfect look, or the gas resources to mow that lawn. And for what? To impress your neighbors? How about impressing them with food free of pesticides and a safe haven for endangered bees and the likes? So to me, being responsible as a steward of the land means doing everything possible to ensure I gain a yield from every inch I can plant into, getting the most from what I have been given, a somewhat perpetuating system in my own backyard. The definition of stewardship, according to Wikipedia, is an ethic that embodies the responsible planning and management of resources. The concepts of stewardship can be applied to the environment and nature, economics, health, property, information, theology. In this discussion, we are only concerned with stewardship regarding the resources we have been blessed with, our property. We should be smart and use every possible inch in a non-wasteful manner. Growing lawns or zero landscaping is an irresponsible management of resources, in my opinion. Grass uses chemicals and massive amounts of water to sustain, and the runoff of excess chemicals gets into our drinking water through the hydrological system. Chemical application of lawns and crops. According to the USGS.gov, pesticides can reach water-bearing aquifers below ground from applications onto crops, fields. Seepage of contaminated surface water, accidental spills and leaks, improper disposal, and even through injection waste materials into wells. As for zero-scaping, yes, you have no need to water. However, now you turned your yard into the equivalent of a desert with not one yield or return in your investment. Another reason to have a forest garden instead of a lawn is the sustainability. Sustainability is something I covered heavily in one of my videos. I will show a link right here. You should develop a food forest on the concept of sustainability because in time it will ensure you have some food in times of crisis. Once your system is matured, it is self-sufficient and may exist and multiply on its own long after you have left the planet. Another reason, forest gardens improve soil microbial life and fungi because it replicates the same process as found in the forest. Fallen debris ensures that the forest floor is constantly covered, important to the life that lives within the soil, because without that covering, the soil dries up and no water, no life. Another good reason to have a forest garden is it's something you can leave to your children. As I stated, a food forest is a gift that is truly out of love because it's something that you intended for generations after generations. It's not only a gift of a food source, but a gift of knowledge and wisdom. Another reason is the increased harvest you get because you are dedicating your entire property to food production instead of just a centralized garden space. Forest gardens typically have less issues with weeds because of the heavy use of mulch. Mulch not only keeps weed seeds from growing up from the bottom of the mulch, but also keeps seeds from landing on top and germinating. Also, because of the heavy use of mulch, food forests need to be intentionally planted out because you cannot just sow seeds or plants directly into the mulch. Food forests requires less watering, or none at all, because of the heavy use of mulch, and also because of the system in place, such as swales or hugel mounds. These systems hold every drop of water that falls from the sky and releases it when the plants and trees need that water in times of drought. In places like Colorado, this is very important to have batteries of water for later use. In places that get too much water, the swales you have in place would guide any excess water out and off of your property. Another good reason to have a forest garden is there's less maintenance, less work once established. Yes, that's right. Once the system has been planted out and established, the most work you will be doing is pruning and harvesting, because this system does not require tilling the soil or pulling weeds. You can spend all that extra time out through hiking instead. Food forests also provides a natural environment for microbiology, fungi, insects, and wildlife. This is because while all your neighbors' yards are a virtual, lifeless, and sterile landscape, only those beneficial insects will come to your yard to pollinate and do what insects do because they have nowhere else to go. The deep mulch will provide the perfect environment for the worms, fungi, and microorganisms. At last, the birds and small animals will have a habitat that is more suiting for them because it offers a place of safety. What could a zero-scape yard offer to anything but maybe, perhaps, a lizard? Typically, chemicals are never used in the forest garden, so this means no chemicals going back into your body, unless you like that kind of stuff. Although we do receive a great share of chemicals into our bodies from the pores in our skin, we can at least try and reduce this a bit by limiting the amount of chemicals we eat. Another good reason for a food forest in your backyard as opposed to lawns, it delays our needs for outside inputs in SHTF situations. Yep, I said it. Okay, now you think I am one of those extreme preppers you see on TV. But in all reality, right now, with this COVID-19 situation, we can see that stuff can hit the fan, and when we at least expect it. And look what everybody did. Everyone panicked and realized that they could potentially starve if they weren't the first to get to the grocery store. There are many hundreds of situations that could lead our country into a hysteria again in the future, and we are not ready for it. Having a forest garden is a plan B. It helps ensure that you don't have to depend on the stores when something does happen. Once your forest is in full production, you're going to have stored produce, canned food, jarred food, dehydrated food, food in the ground such as sunchokes and potatoes. Simply put, you'll not have to rely upon outside inputs in these future bad situations. This is not being selfish. This is being prepared and responsible for your family and self. It's actually being really selfish if you own land and refuse to grow anything but grass, then expect society to take care of you when a SHTF situation occurs. I digress. Fresh fruit and vegetables for virtually free. This is correct. Trees and fruit bushes do not charge for their produce once you have made the initial investment buying your plants and trees. Your food forest will pay for itself within the first few years, with hundreds of dollars worth of food stored and fresh depending on what time of the year it is. What could a sterile grass yard give back? Nothing. And in fact, it will require a lot of inputs in labor, time, and money on your part, and does nothing for you in SHTF situations, although grass smoothies, I heard, are loved by some. Yep, so I'm back in my car. I'm not driving. I'm doing this more for sound reasons. Other reasons for developing your food forest is you can monetize off of it. So you talk money and now people listen. But yes, you can take cuttings, you can plant them in pots, put them out front and have instead of a garage sale, you can have a plant sale. You can harvest your seed and sell the fruit of your labor, obviously, or you can donate to your local food bank. It provides its own biomass, so the food forests, you don't have to keep mulching it after a while, because between the dying perennials at the end of the season and your branches that you're pruning and everything, all that can become mulch eventually. Food forests provide a sanctuary or a place of meditation and prayer. It can be beautiful. It can be a beautiful place. Serene, silent place for you to just go and let the day's worries fly out. Food forests suppress outside noises depending on how you develop it. Food forests can also be used as a defensive barrier in case a SHTF situation occurs. And lastly, food forests will increase your property value exponentially. So, how do we establish a food forest? I'm not going to go too much into depth with this because I want to make this another video. But you start out slow and steady. You do a lot of observation. You want to take the time to really see how your land is, where your slopes are through observation. I made a video on observation, and that's something you should definitely do before you even begin. Start with the soil. The soil, you need to get those microbes in there, and the fastest way I know how to do that is using azomite rock dust, wood chips to mulch, and the worms will come in by themselves and start causing that fungi-dominated soil, and mycelium will take over your landscape eventually. But soil is the most important thing. And then buying your tree. Like I said, design through observation. Watch my video. I think it's going to be right up there. In my opinion, you should definitely hardscape first. Hardscaping is putting in where you want your high part of ground to be, where you want your low spots to be, your water systems, your water catching systems, you name it, put those in first. Your chicken coop, your animal, your livestock, fencing, then start planting your trees. I suggest you put in cover crops to cover the soil if you're not mulching. Put in vining plants, put in rooting plants, put in nitrogen fixers, put in dynamic accumulators, comfrey, small shrubs like blueberries, put in your large shrubs like elderberries, and then work on your trees, your fruit trees, nut trees. And then if you're fortunate like me and you have an overstory already, I have two honey locusts, and that is my dominating overstory. Some say eventually when your fruit trees get big to cut down the dominating trees and let the fruit trees be the dominating ones, but that's not for another decade or so, so I'm not worrying about that right now. Considering companion plants, some plants, I'm not too knowledgeable about this, but kind of like strawberries and asparagus grow well. Beans, corn, and squash grow well. Yeah, so do your own research on that. There's plenty of videos out there that mention guild planting, but I'm going to study that more, be more involved in that in the future videos. In the meantime, while all this is growing, you're going to have spaces in between all of your vegetation and your trees and stuff. This is when you want to interplant with your annual crops. So I plant heavily with pumpkins, squash, stuff that gives me a lot of mulch product at the end of the season. And I just lay those where they were. You want to plant mainly perennial plants, stuff that comes back every year. You don't want to deal with the annuals too much, because further down, when your food forest is truly developed, the annual crops might not get the sunlight that it needs, but the perennials will be good to go. And they come back every year, and they're free, and you can propagate them so you can get multiple generations out of them in different plants and plant them around too. You also want to put in flowers. You want to put in lots of flowers, bulbs, stuff that comes up by itself so that it attracts the bees into your yard so they pollinate your trees. So where do you begin? You can start on your kitchen windowsill with some pots and work your way out to your patio with some pots and grow trees, grow shrubs, whatever, when you attain land. Work from the kitchen outward and start with a kitchen garden and design your way to the outer edge of your property. And you can leave that wild for years and years. So you can take your time. Just buy a few trees a year, put them in, buy a few bushes a year, put them in, buy some bulbs, buy some seeds, continue, have fun. When should you begin your food forest? I would say start today. If not, start searching on the internet for bare root trees and go from there. Let the addiction begin. Alright, so this is all I have for you. I hope that I convinced you to destroy your grass lawn and bring in something that will give you a yield, a profit, a product. Not something that you have to tend to and mow and weed and put down the pesticides and kill your neighbor with those chemicals you're doing. Letting all that chemical wash off, go down into the drain storms and poison everybody else. Thanks a lot. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you like it. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button, and I will continue making videos. I hope you liked it. See ya.